we have with us somebody who does not need much introduction, but still, I'll try to do my best in introducing our esteemed guest for today, Ms. Anjali Gopalan. Um, Ms. Anjali Gopalan is a prolific and dedicated human rights and animal rights activist, founder and director of NAS Foundation India Trust. She has held and extended the baton of socio-political change for equal representation of people driven to the periphery by exclusionary norms and stigmatization topics such as HIV epidemic. She has been actively involved in the pursuit of this decriminalization of Section 377, and in fact, NAS was one of the first foundations to file a PIL against it. Um, an environmentalist and passionate lover of animals, we can never be able to encompass her in enough words, but we really hold her in highest regard. We heartily welcome you, ma'am. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this interview and for the upcoming and for the current edition of Dhara,
Thank
our
you.
magazine. Um, Ma'am, so we'll just begin this interaction. It is no secret that you have done unprecedented work for the society, especially the minority and marginalized people's rights. Be it legal, social, or cultural, you have taken upon many challenges. I just wanted to ask you, what was your motivation for taking on these issues? Was there any specific incident that made you take on to resolve to bring a change?
I Well, for Section 377, yes. I think many small things kept happening while we were doing our work, but I think the thing that really egged us on was when I had started doing a lot of counseling for families, and invariably it was young men being brought in and family trying to convince them to become straight, which obviously was didn't happen with me, so they would go away and forbid these boys from talking to me again. But interestingly, there was a case where this was towards the end of 2000, sometime in 2000, that this man, the family insisted that he should get married no matter what. And the family went away, and I didn't think about it. Until a month later, this young man came back and looking absolutely shattered. And I said, what happened? See, apparently the family had taken him to one of the major hospitals, administered shock therapy to to make him straight, and saying that it's criminal activity. So that is when we decided that something had to be done, because this was really beyond belief ridiculous. Yeah. And luckily for us, Lawyers Collective also was looking to change this situation. So that's how we decided that this is something we really need to take head on. Otherwise, things are not going to change at all. And the fact that homosexuality is criminalized means that a large number of people in this country don't have the rights that everyone takes for granted. And I think that's how it that was the incident that pushed us to take a stand.
Okay. Ma'am, I think in every civics or political science
Hello.
textbooks. Hello,
Hmm.
are you able to hear me? Hello.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Ma'am, in every
Yeah. I can
civics
hear
or
you.
yes, so in every civics or political science textbook, everyone must have come through this maxim at least once. That is, justice delayed is justice denied. Your work in so many distinct yet interconnected sectors of the society is very inspirational.
Yeah.
However, your journey, as rewarding as I hope it is, must have been very frustrating as well. If you have to look back now, is there a moment in which you felt that the social forces were so overwhelming that your resolve to bring a radical change might be subsumed and thus suppressed?
Listen, I think when you do this kind of work, you understand that there are going to be many blocks. Society is not going to accept things so easily, right? Um, but if you decide to take something on like this, I think you have to understand that no matter what the blocks are, you have to challenge it and fight it and deal with it, right? Um, and yes, there were times, I can't say that that it was all hunky dory. Of course, there were times when you felt, is this worth it? Uh, what's the point, you know? But then I suppose you also realize that if you truly believe in working, which is the way Naz's philosophy and our philosophy, is to work towards a just and equitable society. So so where was the option to walk away from it just because of the kind of blocks we were experiencing? So I think when we do this work, we understand that yes, this can happen, but there's no reason for us to give up hope. Otherwise, what's the point in doing what we're doing?
Absolutely. Ma'am, as you also mentioned, and we also know that you have extensively engaged with the treatment and counseling for of HIV patients when you decided to start NAS. Since time
Yeah,
immemorial, venereal diseases like HIV have been viewed as a consequence of cardinal moral transgression of that the society condemns. In light of this, the stigma of the disease often becomes more heightened in the case of the
yeah,
LGBTQ
yeah.
plus community. Uh, how do you think this has affected the mental health of the patients of the community?
Listen, it's interesting where HIV is concerned. If you remember, in the early 80s, this was known as gay cancer. It was
Yes,
called GRID, gay-related immune dysfunction or disease, right? Um, in the West, it was definitely seen as a gay disease, which wasn't in this country. Because in this country, most infections, majority of the cases, 87% is the heterosexual route of transmission. However, the stigma, it's a double stigma. Number one, HIV itself is highly stigmatized. And the reason it is stigmatized is it has huge moral connotations. Um, whether you're straight or gay, if you have HIV, you're judged as being immoral. You're judged that you stepped out of your marriage, that you have had extramarital relationships. So, there are, this is the problem with HIV, right? People get judged. So, the same thing happened. If you are from the LGBTQI community, it's a double whammy. Not only not only is homosexuality judged negatively, mental health of people from this community is tremendous, obviously. And what makes it worse is that because homosexuality has been criminalized, had been criminalized, people were not feeling that they were not comfortable about accessing healthcare facilities. They were not open about talking about themselves, their sexuality, and what they're feeling and what they're going through. Um, in many cases, there was so much of self-hatred, people blaming themselves for being not good. I remember initially in the first few years of our work, when I used to do outreach myself, um, it used to break my heart. So many times I've had young men ask me, is there any medicine to make me feel differently? So nothing could be so awful, right? Imagine going through this in life where you're then really not wanting to feel, or you think what the way you feel is so wrong. So clearly the impact on mental health is humongous.
uh, uh, just on a related note, what has been the response of the medical community while dealing with patients of LGBTQ community, especially in a case like HIV during the early years?
Yeah. Um, initially when we started our work, I remember I had met doctors who used to tell me, why are you wasting your time? What's the point? And this is for people who were HIV positive, right? So the other thing also was, don't we have more important things in this country than gay people? So these are the two things I used to hear all the time. Uh, and I think part of the problem is, of course, our own homophobic attitudes towards the community as well as to HIV, our negative, the notations in our heads about HIV. But I also think people, the professionals, have not been trained. They've not been, in their training, there's no component around working with any kind of marginalized communities, right? And all of this has to do with attitudes. So unless we work on our attitudes, nothing is going to change. The medical profession is a reflection of society at large. Why would they be any different? And unfortunately, I don't, for example, doctors are not trained to look at specific infections which impact gay people. So there's always been, initially at least, it used to be awful, but over the years, many NGOs and community-based organizations have worked with healthcare professionals. So we do see a change in attitude. We do see a change in how doctors are today treating people from the LGBTQI community. I think the decriminalization of homosexuality in many ways has helped. Does it mean that everything is hunky-dory? No, of course there are many doctors. We are right now sitting with the Delhi Medical Council because they're still conversion therapy openly. They're advertising it. So, it's not to say that everything has changed overnight. No, it's a long process. You still have doctors who are extremely homophobic and who will also use the biggest problem we have is families trying to make gay boys straight, for example. They're trying to make gay men straight. It's the families who are doing it. And these medical professionals prey on them. So that is still going on. It's not like that's become, whether it's medical professionals or it is the Baba Ramdevs of the world who claim to have there's a lot of work to be done at that level where bring about change in attitudes. But I also think we need strong laws which will ensure that people don't behave in this exploitative manner.
Um, Now because we were talking about the laws, so there's currently a plea in front of Delhi High Court, which is the next hearing is scheduled for January 2021 to consider same-sex marriage in the Special Marriage Act, passed in 1954. Considering the recent backlash that the Tanishq faced for airing an advertisement that shows a
Yeah.
situation well sanctioned by the law, particularly this act, do you think winning the legal battle would bring any material change in the framework of the society that is becoming more and more intolerant each day?
Listen, I think the laws need to change. I think people who, if they want to get married, if that's what they want, they should have the right to get married, just as, and that is true for all citizens in this country, right? So, on what basis are you denying this right to some people versus others? So, I think that should happen. But my fear is that, and just because, suppose that does happen, it doesn't mean that attitudes will change overnight, but at least it's a protection. At least it is it will allow people who want to get married, right? Um, but I think the biggest pushback is going to be around marriage, because that's
Okay.
one thing that everybody seems to come together on. For some reason, marriage is the one. I feel there's going to be a lot of issues around trying to get anything done on that front. But I feel what is more important is, and many don't agree with me on this, but this is something I feel very strongly about, is that it makes more sense to try and get an anti-discriminatory law in place, which will say that you cannot discriminate against anyone on any grounds. So whether you're gay or straight or bi or whatever, or trans or whatever it is that you are, or you're Hindu or you're Muslim or Christian, whatever, it doesn't matter. You cannot be discriminated against. I think that is something I feel will have a better impact than trying, because today you're going to fight for marriage, then tomorrow you're going to fight for adoption. Then are we going to keep fighting for each and every right? Or should we not try and ensure that everybody has access to all rights that are available in this country, to all its citizens? Why should one set of citizens be denied one set of rights? So it's something I've been thinking about a lot about now.
That is actually a very interesting point, and to have one legislature, one piece of law which safeguards all citizens irrespective of their gender, sexual orientation, religion, XYZ things,
Yeah.
and from any and every sort of discrimination in the public domain. And given the rising intolerance that we are seeing in the country right now, like, I think this is a very logical solution to the problem. Perhaps the reason, like, we never thought
it's
about this,
kind of, yeah.
in the country we tend to take our rights for granted. Like, we think that, hey, we won't get discriminated unless and until we do, which we do end up seeing on an everyday basis now.
Yeah. See what's happening to so many people today. It's really scary. And to me, the frightening part, of course, is that the courts are not necessarily being extremely or taking a stand which is protective of citizens. So when there's no law at all, how difficult is it going to be? Yeah, the situation in the country is really, really sad right now.
Sadly, I have to agree with you. Okay, so talking about something different, that is the work NAS Foundation is doing in having educational campaigns for children. Now, childhood is a time when a person internalizes a lot of statements that one acts out on, believe in during adulthood. And the education through sanctioned textbooks either deliberately endorses or deliberately omits certain worldviews. This is something that I personally believe in. Since you're closely connected with the process, how do you ensure that there is a transmission of holistic and unbiased knowledge that would, and I hope, enable children to question the binaries and stereotypes attached to them of both gender as well as sexuality?
Look, in the work we do, that's very much a part of the sessions. That's included in the sessions that we provide to young people. But having said that, this is no response to an issue like this. NGOs can, or community-based organizations or individuals can only work in a very limited fashion on an issue like this, unless it becomes a part of the curricula. So as part of, for example, we can do something similar when we're doing the session on health, because we use that as the foot in the door. But this is no way to do it. It's so ad hoc. It's so arbitrary. Only a select few will get this information. So unless we make sex education a part of our school curriculum, we are not going anywhere with this. And when I'm saying school to make it part of our school curriculum, I'm saying we must have age appropriate information on these issues where we walk young people through these whatever issues emerge. Otherwise, what is the point? We are not talking openly about anything. We are not even sharing information that young people need to protect themselves. We don't even want to talk about sexual abuse. And that's, UNICEF did a study where they found some horrendous number of children in this country who are exposed to sexual abuse. So unless the government and unless the authorities are serious about wanting to do something about this, I think what groups like NAS and others do can only be a drop in the ocean and can only show what is possible. We need government to step in to take it to scale. We need government to understand the importance of this kind of education for our young people. But our government still, very often I've heard many people in positions of authority, bureaucrats. When I say government, I just don't mean the political leaders. I'm also talking about bureaucrats. They'll say, I've heard them say things like, oh, this will make our children more promiscuous. Not understanding that when we talk about sex education, when we talk about these issues about, respecting different differences in their schools and in their classes and all of that, they think that our children are just going to become promiscuous and are not going to be able to control themselves. These are the kind of things they tell me when I'm talking about the importance of having all of this as part of the curriculum. So it's very difficult to sway that mindset. It's how do we get them to understand that, look, the time that you grew up in and now is really different. Young people have access to the internet, which was not there earlier. So all the more reason for us to ensure that we have an open environment where they can ask whatever they want and they can understand. They understand the basics. What about children to me, it's bizarre that we think of our young people like this. We're so disrespectful of them, as if they can't understand. They can't understand consequences of behavior. It doesn't make sense to me, and I'm sure to anybody else who's thinking right, that this is not the way to look at it. But unfortunately, we haven't made much progress on that front.
So career planning for women is also a dedicated endeavor by NAS that helps women carve out an identity for themselves, free of social roles accepted out of them, especially in rural areas. We would love to know how the response has been to this program from women, but also from their families.
See, actually, when we started this program, I was really skeptical. I didn't think it would work. But I started it saying that, look, we are not being able to bring down infection rates in young women. So we need to look at HIV prevention from a different lens. And I was amazed to see the response from these young women. But interestingly, obviously, we can't work with the young women in isolation. So families have been very much a part of this process. We've had to convince families. We've had to work very closely with families to allow their girls to, number one, play a game, but then do the kind of sessions that we were doing with them, and then come further training to do skills development, and then actually working in organizations like Standard Chartered, etc. So therefore, parents had to wrap their heads around, is it okay for our girls to be working late in the evening or working night shifts? So working closely with families also becomes very important when you're working with young girls. Um, and the other thing I'm now I've always felt very strongly about this is that it's all right to work with young girls, but we can't leave boys out of this, because if we are looking at empowering young women, looking at empowering young women, and we are assuming that men or young boys are better off. That's not true, because no one is teaching these young boys anything. No one is teaching them how to respect women, for example. And all these are very taught behaviors. And therefore, the understanding is when we are talking about working with the girl child or young women, it's very important that we now start looking at how do we ensure that we don't create more of a gap between men and women, that we include boys in this process, because otherwise we're not, I don't think we're going to be able to do much in terms of changing attitudes towards women.
Well, that is very right, and I think like whatever work happens, like ultimately we need to understand that these two genders need to go hand in hand. Like when we are working with one, we also need to focus on the other as well, and only if they grow together, like society will lead anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so for my last question, if I had to ask you your vision for the future of NAS and generally our society, both palpable and what right now might seem to be a utopian dream, what would your answer be?
Well, I would, if I think about the future, well, as far as I'm concerned, NAS is already in the hands of the next generation, you know. But my dream always has been, and I've been very committed to this, is working for a just society. And I hope NAS will continue doing that. I know that I will. And I'm sure NAS will too, because that's so integral to who we are and the commitments we have made so far.
Okay. Thank you so very much for giving us the time. Like it has absolutely been an honor. Like when I was even mailing, like requesting you for the interview, like I was so skeptical whether it's gonna work out or not, whether you would have time for or not, because like it is a very young member organization. So like I started the organization few years back when I was still in college, and like it's been a few years, and but we're still growing. Like we are trying to engage with people, learn from the experiences, and yeah. But thank you so very much. And yeah,
No, you're welcome, and keep up the good work and all the best.